Soei was in high spirits. He had been secretly watching Rimuru's battle, a contest Rimuru won decisively. Rimuru, even while taking on Veldora and Velgrynd simultaneously, appeared to have the upper hand throughout. Mid-battle, Rimuru consumed Veldora, evolving himself, which allowed him to overpower Velgrynd in the end. Soei, admiring Rimuru's strength, knew he would have been helpless against such an onslaught. Despite Rimuru's victory, the full extent of his newfound strength wasn't immediately visible. Even through the soul corridor connecting them, Soei couldn't sense anything, and he suspected he wasn't the only one curious about this. Diablo, who hadn't intervened, remained by Rimuru's side, a position Soei envied but understood. Testarossa, too, was frustrated. She had declared her intention to stay, and Soei understood why. Velgrynd, possibly realizing her disadvantage, had moved to protect Ludora during the fight with Rimuru. There was no guarantee she would stay obediently in her gate until the other 7 were destroyed. Testarossa, cunning as ever, likely foresaw this possibility and believed she could handle Velgrynd alone. Soei, knowing he couldn't defeat Velgrynd, found it natural to feel a bit jealous. Benimaru must have tacitly approved Testarossa's plan, knowing his own fire-based moves would be ineffective against Velgrynd. Testarossa, more qualified for the job, was positioned for a potential rematch with Velgrynd. Soei, fully aware that his techniques would be ineffective against her spatial control skills, accepted his limitations and gave up his seat to Testarossa. Despite mixed feelings, Soei devoted himself to his work. Overjoyed by Rimuru's victory, he was increasingly dissatisfied with his own lack of power. With absolute orders from Rimuru to kill his enemy, he wouldn't hesitate. For Soei, following orders was natural. Soei, in high spirits after witnessing Rimuru's crushing victory, approached his target within the battle arena of the gate. His opponent, Gardner, the 4th-ranked single-digit, stood ready. Gardner eyed Soei, gauging his worth with a cruel, hidden desire to torment him. Soei met Gardner's introduction with silence, followed by a sigh of disgust. His dismissive attitude incensed Gardner, locking him into Soei's trap before the fight even began. Gardner, aware of Soei's intelligence bureau but underestimating his combat abilities, taunted him to provoke a reaction. However, Soei remained composed. In the short time they faced each other, he had already identified Gardner's full abilities. Gardner, unaware of this, recklessly slashed with his azure dragon blade. His strikes, a mixture of strength and skill, failed to land as Soei dove into the shadows. Gardner's sword sliced through the air, missing its mark. Off balance from his momentum, Gardner was vulnerable. Soei, ready for this moment, fired a bullet from the shadows, hitting Gardner in the chest. Gardner collapsed, coughing up blood. Soei, emerging from the shadows, finished Gardner off with a small Walther P99 handgun. He had recently obtained the prototype from Rimuru and practiced firing it from shadow space. The results were clear, with the bullet lodged in Gardner's heart. Too easy, Soei remarked. No matter how strong a fighter was, Soei believed that catching them off guard could finish them off with a single blow. This theory proved true, as his plan worked brilliantly against Gardner. The bullet Soei fired was infused with all his skills: ultra speed, insta-kill from his unique skill Shadow Striker, poison, paralysis, and corrosion effects. Ultra speed propelled the bullet at dozens of times the speed of sound, and insta-kill ensured it could destroy the spiritual body of a life form. The various status ailments made Gardner's death seem certain. However, as Soei started walking back toward the gate, a voice shot out from behind him. "You let your guard down, fool." Before he could react, his head was severed by Gardner's azure dragon blade, which emerged from his chest. Gardner, previously thought dead, stood perfectly fine while his corpse lay on the ground. This could be attributed to the special ability he acquired, Parallel Existence, granted by Ludora using Alternate. Unlike Velgrynd, Gardner's magicules were average for a Saint-Level person, putting him on par with an awakened demon lord. He could create only one replication at a time, but that was enough for his strategy. Gardner's tactic involved using a replication as a decoy while he attacked with his main body. Despite its effectiveness, he preferred tormenting his opponents, a pleasure this approach denied him. Gardner, ensuring anyone who went through the gate was killed, needed to check on Soei. As he approached Soei's decapitated body, it dissipated into a black mist. "Damn it!" Gardner shouted, realizing too late that he had been dealing with a replication the whole time. Had he not lost his composure, he might have discerned this earlier. Soei's cold voice echoed, "A simple replication is good enough to use as a decoy. It appears you are wasting a great power there." Zoe's cold voice cut through the air, delivering a valid criticism that struck Gardner to the core. Gardner, who had once met Velgrynd, remembered his defeat at the hands of one of her parallel existences. He craved that skill and had now acquired a form of it, along with the azure dragon blade gifted by Velgrynd. Soei, aware of Gardner's admiration for Velgrynd's abilities, had been manipulating him from the start. This realization angered Gardner, shaking his confidence. Doubt began to affect his abilities, just as Soei had intended. In a desperate move, Gardner summoned his hidden technique, deploying multiple parallel existences at once. Each replication was real, making it meaningless to defeat any single one. This ultimate attack, which burned Gardner's very life, happened in the blink of an eye, posing a significant threat to Soei. The greatest weakness of Soei's replications was their inability to activate unique skills. Only Soei's main body could do so. This limitation meant Soei had to be close to a replication to create the illusion of skill activation. But even that came with a lethal time lag against stronger opponents. As Gardner's attack neared, Soei realized he had been caught off guard at the most dangerous moment of the fight. Soei prepared for Gardner's final onslaught, determined not to die. He resolved to survive and make amends to Rimuru later. Just then, he heard a strange voice, promising to grant him power. Zoe heard a strange voice, instinctively understanding that it must never be pursued. Despite his position as the leader of an intelligence department, he made the decision without hesitation. The voice assured him, granting him a new ability. Zoe instantly understood this power, realizing that his replications were now separate bodies. He had acquired parallel existence. As Gardner unleashed his final attack, believing it was the end for both of them, Soei revealed his newfound power. His main body and replications were now one and the same. With Thousand Shadow Death, Soei's shadow stretched out, turning into 1,000 arms that seized Gardner. This was the effect of Eye of the Moon, a skill from the ultimate gift Tsukuyomi, Lord of Moonshade. It allowed Soei to manipulate shadows at will, enabling him to investigate any part of the world and move to them instantly. Combined with parallel existence, Soei could create multiple pairs of arms to attack freely from the shadows, an effective battle tactic. As Gardner was held down, he shouted defiantly, but his life was ended by Soei's insta-kill before he could finish his thought. Soei informed Gardner that Rimuru had already taken care of Lady Velgrynd, and Benimaru was handling Granit, one far stronger than Soei. With his opponent defeated, Soei melted away, allowing Gardner to be swallowed by the darkness. Damrada, alone as he watched over one of the 8 gates, couldn't help but wonder, why did it turn out like this? Yuki had fallen into the hands of Emperor Ludora, stripped of his free will like his friends. Ludora ordered Damrada to watch over them, but another order soon followed. Yuki was to be watched by someone else, and Damrada was to board the Emperor's flagship, marking the beginning of a great air battle. Single digits ranked 6th or higher knew the true identity of the Marshal, but were forbidden to disclose it. The information was so confidential that Damrada's memories were manipulated for extra security when he traveled abroad. Upon seeing the Marshal reveal herself, Damrada recalled his most important promise to Ludora and the reason it was crucial to fulfill it. There was no time to dwell on this, as the demon lord Rimuru, whom Damrada had recently seen and underestimated, made his move. Despite being captured in Velgrynd's alternate dimension, Rimuru broke free, proving himself a formidable threat. Veldora was completely dominated, giving Ludora a decisive advantage over Guy. However, Damrada began questioning what was truly best for Ludora. Rimuru's appearance and golden-eyed glare made Damrada realize his naivety. Kondo's attack on Rimuru failed, and Rimuru's expression conveyed disdain, as if Damrada and the others were already dead. Rimuru's eyes told them they were insignificant, promising them terror before dealing with them personally. Damrada understood that if things continued this way, they were all doomed, including Emperor Ludora. For Rimuru, tactical victory in this situation meant achieving two crucial objectives: recapturing Veldora and eliminating the invaders. Veldora, the Demon Lord's staunchest ally, losing his free will, was unacceptable to Rimuru. His presence indicated a readiness to confront Velgrynd, and the battle's outcome was unpredictable from Damrada's perspective. Eliminating the invaders was another key goal. Although Rimuru was known as a pacifist, he was not non-violent. His lands had faced numerous invasions, and he had repelled them by any means necessary. Thanks to Veldora's help, the land of monsters had a history of victories, and Rimuru would never forgive the Empire's aggression. For him, the only viable course of action was to kill every single Imperial soldier, as bargaining was meaningless. Without a previous agreement over the war, surrender did not guarantee forgiveness. The Empire's trap during negotiations had ruined any chance of trust, making further talks impossible. Damrada recognized that they should have made more effort to stop His Majesty. He had overestimated the Empire's fighting ability, believing they could dictate terms of victory. He aimed to display the Empire's strength, crush opponents, and establish puppet states. But this time, they miscalculated. The battlefield showed that both sides were evenly matched, and even Emperor Ludora's safety was uncertain. This realization left Damrada feeling deeply depressed, understanding the dire consequences of their misjudgment. Damrada's primary concern remained the promise he made to Ludora. He was certain Rimuru aimed to eliminate the Emperor as well, which left Damrada conflicted about the right course of action. He wanted to fulfill his promise to Ludora with his own hands, but defeating Rimuru seemed an insurmountable challenge. As Damrada analyzed the situation, he shivered at the reality before him. The flagship was surrounded by terrifying magic, and the survivors were now protecting the 8 gates. To Damrada, this did not appear to be a battle among equals, but rather a dreadful error in judgment. Damrada stood before Ultima, one of the 7 primal demons and a servant of the demon lord Rimuru. The young girl, smiling happily, bore unbelievable strength, her power enhanced by Rimuru himself. The accuracy and force of her death streak attack confirmed the demons had evolved significantly. Ultima, amused by the situation, reveled in the power granted to her by Rimuru. For Damrada, this realization was a nightmare. He could hardly fathom a mere demon lord empowering primals, a feat not even Guy Crimson had achieved. Despite this, Damrada felt obliged to fulfill his promise to Ludora, which meant facing Ultima with all his might. Reflecting on his past, Damrada resolved that as long as he could fulfill his goal, choosing a harder path was acceptable. Looking at Ultima's overwhelming force, he stood strong and unwavering. Ultima, noticing his resolve, acknowledged his readiness for battle. Damrada, declaring his intention to show his full power, prepared for the confrontation. With a mutual understanding, the battle began between Damrada, second ranked of the single digits, and Ultima, the Pain Lord. Ultima chuckled as she observed Damrada, sensing his incredible power, exceptional for a human being, even as a saint. If she hadn't evolved, this battle might not have been winnable for her. She recognized that Damrada's strength was on par with Hinata, a natural enemy to all monsters. However, unlike Hinata, Damrada seemed to have honed his abilities purely against humans and individual targets, which could certainly be a nuisance. Ultima understood that people who developed their own abilities, rather than having them granted by others, were particularly troublesome. Hakuro was a prime example of this. Someone who could employ a seemingly boundless number of techniques to handle any situation. Adapting and applying those skills was the secret to his strength, and to higher forms of existence like Ultima, it was an alien concept. Demons existed on a much higher plane of existence than people. With just a release of magic force, they could launch devastating attacks. Ultima, standing at the pinnacle of the demon race, was born with perfect control over magic, making her wishes come true effortlessly. Until recently, she believed only other primals or wild cards like true dragons could defeat her. This belief was shattered during her battle with Velgrynd. Despite being outclassed, Ultima and her cohorts managed to put up a good fight against Velgrynd, even defeating one of her separate bodies, which held only about 10% of Velgrind's strength. They learned that improper use of their power could lead to defeat by lower-ranked opponents. The battles taught them valuable lessons, as true dragons showcased highly precise and sophisticated magic manipulation, overwhelming even the demonesses. Ultima realized that applying an ultimate skill to magic gave it much greater precision and control. Velgrynd's ability to keep the demonesses at bay, despite doing little more than that, highlighted the importance of this technique. For Carrera, a self-proclaimed magic expert, it was a humiliating but enlightening experience. Never before had Ultima considered that incorporating the effects of a skill into magic could double its power. The battle opened her eyes to new possibilities. While they had a strong foundation, innovation and hard work could make them even stronger. Ultima, usually not craving power, found herself sincerely wanting to achieve greater heights through hard work and study. If someone already near invincible strove for even greater strength, they could achieve unimaginable levels of power. Ultima saw this potential in Velgrynd and Guy Crimson. Diablo, constantly pursuing his interests, was a wild card, completely different from Ultima and Carrera, who had never made an effort at anything before, but Testarossa was a different story. Ultima was aware that she was the least experienced of the 7 primals. While she felt she could hold her own against Misery or Rain, she doubted her chances against Testarossa and Carrera in a serious fight. Testarossa was perfect and elegant, confident even with her habit of looking down on others. Carrera, on the other hand, was arrogant and sloppy, capable of perfection if she wanted, but often losing interest. Ultima saw herself as trailing behind the other Devil Lords. She couldn't control magic as precisely as Testarossa, or wield magic force as powerfully as Carrera. Her talent was immense, but she had never fully applied herself. This made her similar to Carrera, and the two had competed as rivals for a long time. Carrera's new interest in swordsmanship only fueled Ultima's jealousy. However, things were about to change. Ultima had the opportunity to awaken and gain the power she desired. She realized she had the most room for growth among them all. Grateful to her master, Rimuru, Ultima focused on attaining a higher plane of existence and proving her worth to him. As she watched Agara's battle, Ultima continued to wish for more power. Eventually, she heard a voice offering to help shape her wish. This was the ultimate skill, Samael, Lord of Deathly Poison, which could detect the weaknesses of any living thing and create a suitable poison to target them. With this power, Ultima felt invincible. Remembering Diablo's advice to hone her skills and not rely solely on latent power, Ultima realized he had her best interests in mind. True power required the right control and effort, not just calling on it in a pinch. Ultima was now deeply convinced of the truth behind Diablo's advice. Recalling that Diablo rarely used the powers granted to him by Rimuru unless absolutely necessary, she realized he must have had a good reason for this restraint. Inspired by this, Ultima decided to see her battle against Damrada as an opportunity for growth. Damrada, a formidable opponent, was the perfect target for Ultima to test her newfound abilities. Despite her initial frustration with Diablo's training methods, she recognized the value in the challenge. Determined to win, Ultima planned to use her ultimate skill, Samael, Lord of Deathly Poison, to secure victory. This skill could detect the weaknesses of any living thing and create a suitable poison to exploit them. Ultima resolved to win by perfectly applying the abilities she had obtained through her own desires, rather than relying solely on her latent power. By doing so, she aimed to prove her usefulness to Rimuru. The battle between Ultima and Damrada reached its peak intensity. Ultima had the advantage in raw power, but Damrada's techniques expertly parried her attacks. Occasionally, he focused his entire fighting spirit to cancel out her attacks head-on. Damrada's ability to think on his feet and never waste a movement fascinated Ultima, helping her realize many things mid-battle. She admired his balance and precision, realizing that his flow wouldn't put him off balance. In contrast to Zhejiang, who was too overwhelming for martial arts practice, Damrada was the perfect rival for Ultima. His approachable yet formidable nature made him an ideal opponent for her to test her limits. Ultima appreciated how fortunate she was to face such a challenging adversary. Her overwhelming magical power allowed her to defend against any attack and crush enemies with brute force. However, experiencing it in battle made it all the more real. As both combatants increased their power, the battle grew even more ferocious, pushing Ultima to harness her abilities with greater precision and control. The powers were so closely balanced, there was no telling when the battle would end. Or at least, it seemed that way at a glance. Ultima looked like she was truly enjoying herself, while Damrada appeared disgusted by the whole affair. Despite his words, Damrada knew deep down that if this kept up, he would be the one to lose. Ultima was still growing, but Damrada was already giving her everything he had, all of his technique at once. There was no time to enjoy this. All that mattered was how he would ever defeat her. Primals, after all, were like the chosen ones of magic. No half-hearted attack could ever work against someone capable of rewriting the physical laws of this planet. Only through applying the ultimate enchantment, alternate to all of his attacks, could Damrada inflict any damage on Ultima. He had spent over 2 millennia training himself, growing capable of using this borrowed power as naturally as breathing. It was so familiar to Damrada now that he had all but forgotten Ludora had lent it to him in the first place. Besides, demons had certain checks placed on them. There was a set limit to their magicule counts, although that seemed to be unlocked at the moment. As a result, someone Saint class like Damrada had more overall energy on hand than Ultima, hence why he could keep it even with her. However, the more he attacked, the more he exposed his hand. He doubted any of his more powerful finishers would work against her anyway. Ultima was still launching multiple attacks at once, all with the same mind-boggling force, and he was still canceling them all out at the same time. This didn't seem to frustrate her. In fact, Ultima looked happy. "That's so good, like a textbook example," she exclaimed, much to Damrada's frustration. He was in the corner. Not only was he in no position to hold anything back, but as soon as he showed any new move, he could feel Ultima growing off of it, like a pile of dry sand absorbing water. Damrada, realizing the terrifying potential of primals, could only laugh at his predicament. An external observer might think their abilities were balanced, but that balance was about to tip. As long as one side continued growing, the scales would inevitably shift, and now, the moment had arrived. "Ha ha! Now I'm really starting to get it." Ultima's mood shifted noticeably as she released her stored power. 6 pairs of featherless, bat-like wings, shining light purple, sprouted behind her. With a sudden movement, the 12 wings changed shape and aimed at Damrada, making it nearly impossible for him to evade or counter. Damrada, trying to parry the fist-like wings, was blown away as the fists crossed each other. The power behind Ultima's attacks was incomparable to anything before, and it was rapidly increasing. There was no longer any upper limit to her magicule count, and she could make herself as powerful as she wished. Despite the severe power, Damrada focused more than ever to avoid the attacks. Internally, he felt a deep sense of urgency. If this continued, there was no way he could win. Seeing no other option, he resorted to desperate measures, allowing one of the wings to pierce his leg. This was part of his strategy, banking on the demon's arrogance to let Ultima drop her guard. "Ah ha 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 ha, I thought you were going to just keep dodging me. Or did you get tired?" Ultima taunted with a wicked grin, her wings plunging into Damrada's limbs, but not his vitals. Damrada was sure his plan would succeed. Pretending to be wounded and fallen, he unleashed his most powerful finisher move, Holy Smash Fist, compressing all his fighting spirit as a saint into a single strike. However, just as he was about to finish Ultima off, Damrada felt a chill. All that fell away was a single wing, which seemed to change shape, imitating Ultima herself. Damrada couldn't see it, and then it was too late. Ultima's poison smash fist struck Damrada with devastating precision, her hand infused with immense magic force and the deathly poison from Samael. The dark purple poison crushed Damrada's defenses, causing him to fall and vomit blood. Ah ha 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 ha! Too bad, huh? I was right on target. Ultima's evil laughter echoed as Damrada, drained of energy, struggled to stand but failed. Gathering his strength, he stared at Ultima, acknowledging her power. That is no smash fist, you fool. It was a spear hand strike, as if you could copy me after just one look. But the power behind it was excellent. Call it bloody death hand instead, perhaps. Gazing upward with a satisfied look, Damrada realized his complete defeat. Rimuru's forces had crushed him long before he could challenge Guy to a final battle. He reflected on the impossibility of rebuilding the Empire's position, with Emperor Ludora running out of time. "Your Majesty," Damrada muttered, looking back on his life with remorse. The gravity of Emperor Ludora's request weighed heavily on Damrada. Ludora had confided in him about the toll of reincarnation, revealing that each rebirth wore down his heart and soul. This gradual erosion threatened Ludora's very identity, a burden that Damrada was reluctant to acknowledge, but couldn't ignore. Ludora's resurrections, facilitated by a special ritual, allowed his new body to inherit the immense magic force of the old one. This process, essential for maintaining his godlike status, was something only Ludora could manage. Damrada had no solution for the soul weariness that accompanied these resurrections. Despite the seriousness of the situation, Damrada initially dismissed Ludora's concerns with a sense of duty, refusing to reduce his workload. However, Ludora's request lingered in his mind. He wanted Damrada to end his life if he ever ceased to be himself, a task too burdensome to entrust to Velgrynd. Damrada, understanding the gravity of this promise, struggled internally but ultimately accepted. He vowed to settle Ludora's affairs if such a situation arose, offering assurance for Ludora to continue his political duties without worry. This promise, made on a distant day, was one Damrada hoped never to fulfill. Yet it hung over him, a solemn duty to his best friend and emperor. As time marched on, the weight of this commitment remained a constant reminder of the depth of their bond and the heavy responsibility Damrada bore. Ludora's burden was heavy, his struggle with Michael, Lord of Justice, pushing him to his limits. Absolute justice, as Ludora acknowledged, could be as destructive as evil. There was no universal justice, a truth weighing on him. He reminded Damrada of his promise, an order to find someone capable of overcoming Michael and defeating Ludora if Damrada failed. This order was essentially a request for Damrada to eliminate him if necessary. Damrada, loyal as ever, agreed without hesitation. Ludora expressed his gratitude and reflected on the immense power Michael wielded, a power perhaps too great for him to manage. Whether victorious or defeated in his game against Guy, Ludora intended to use Michael wisely, but urged Damrada to act decisively if things went out of control. Damrada, understanding the gravity of this promise, accepted the order. Ludora, recalling his oath to Veldanova, felt the weight of his potential failure. His murmured words about apologizing in the afterlife underscored his deep sense of responsibility and regret. As Damrada quietly left the room, as Damrada's consciousness wavered, he found himself grappling with intense regret and relief. The task of seeking someone to kill his beloved master, Emperor Ludora, had been a heavy burden. Despite the pain it caused him, he could never fathom ending the life of someone he valued so deeply. The game between Ludora and Guy was of no importance to Damrada. What mattered was Ludora's will and how it shaped the world. Guy Crimson, despite being an arrogant demon lord, was not a tyrant. His rule, though absolute, followed a proper framework of rules. Damrada believed they could have reached a mutually acceptable agreement, but Ludora's orders prevailed. Damrada's journey to find a suitable candidate led him to Yuki Kagurazaka, whose unique ability anti-skill could nullify ultimate skills. However, Yuki fell into Ludora's hands, rendering Damrada's efforts futile. This raised a troubling question. Why did Ludora interfere with the search for someone who could potentially kill him? Absorbed in his thoughts, Damrada muttered about the truth he was finally confronting. Ultima, clearly irritated, demanded an explanation, but Damrada's mind was elsewhere. In this moment of clarity, he pieced together the signs he had long ignored. The realization that Emperor Ludora had already changed weighed heavily on him, marking the culmination of his internal struggle and the acceptance of an inevitable truth. In this moment of clarity, he pieced together the signs he had long ignored. The realization that Emperor Ludora had already changed weighed heavily on him, marking the culmination of his internal struggle and the acceptance of an inevitable truth. Ludora's ideals had always been noble: unite the world, end conflict and poverty, and elevate humanity. Damrada admired these goals and Ludora's relentless pursuit of them. But now, those ideals seemed out of reach, as Ludora had changed too much. Damrada's regret was profound. He wasn't afraid to die, but saddened by his inability to keep his promise. He realized that Ludora's true self had been overshadowed by Michael, Lord of Justice. Damrada knew he had to stop Michael, but his time was running out. He had sought out Yuki for this task, but with Yuki now under Ludora's control, his plan had failed. There was still one other candidate, Rimuru, the fearsome demon lord. As Damrada faced his final moments, he held on to the hope that Rimuru, his greatest enemy, could also be the one to stop Michael and fulfill his promise to Ludora. Damrada's last moments were marked by a sense of resolution. As he choked on his own blood, he managed to convey his final wishes to Ultima. Despite her playful demeanor, Ultima felt a connection to Damrada after their intense battle and agreed to his request. "I want you to kill His Majesty, kill Ludora for me," he asked, to which Ultima was surprisingly open. "Oh, come on, let me do the honors, 'cause I'm sure open to taking the job. I was planning to kill that Ludora guy anyway," she said with her usual whimsy. Damrada had one more favor to ask. Protect him. Protect the boy Masayuki. Ultima, though demanding a reward for her services, agreed to this as well. Damrada's offer was everything he had, his soul and skills. "Your reward is all of me. I entrust you with my soul and all of my skills etched deep into my body." Ultima accepted, and with a smile Damrada uttered his last words, "Your Majesty, I will come to you now." He breathed his last, and the long life of Damrada, Lord of the Fist and close friend of Emperor Ludora, came to an end. Standing alone in the battle arena of an alternate dimension, Ultima felt a tinge of disappointment. "Well, that's no fun. His heart core disappeared on me. I was going to offer it to Sir Rimuru too," she muttered. Despite her disappointment, she gently wrapped Damrada's body in her 12 wings, fulfilling their agreement and taking all of him as her own. With this act, the battle between them came to an end. One Lord of the Fist had ended his life, and in his place, a new demon of the Fist was born. Damrada, in his final moments, had bestowed one of the most dreadful powers known to mankind upon one of the worst demons in history. The legacy of his craft would now continue with Ultima, a third generation. Whether this would have filled Damrada with shame or pride is a question that would remain unanswered. With him gone, the responsibility of assessing the fallout and consequences of this transfer of power fell to the survivors. As Kondo and Agera faced off in the center of the arena, the tension was palpable. Kondo's silence and scathing words hinted at his disdain for the situation. Carrera, undeterred, offered to serve as an observer, insisting that Agera had wished for this one-on-one confrontation. However, Kondo wasn't inclined to trust her. His skepticism was warranted, as demons were known for their deceit. He believed in eliminating uncertainties in warfare and saw no reason to entertain the farce. As Agera attempted to express gratitude, a gunshot rang out, and he fell clutching his chest. Carrera swiftly intervened, parrying Kondo's descending sword. Kondo, unimpressed, commented on her speed, but remained unfazed. Carrera offered to take up the fight, pointing out the crack in her blade. As Agera stood up, the hole in his chest already closed, he acknowledged the disdain with which Kondo had disarmed him. Kondo's eraser bullet had absorbed and eliminated Agera's energy, but it hadn't been his full effort, leaving Agera still capable of fighting. Transforming into a sword, Agera entrusted himself to Carrera, who filled him with her magic force, restoring his energy. Kondo, however, was unamused and hostile. To him, Carrera was just as guilty for holding Agera in her hands. About an hour into the fight, Carrera was on her knees, facing an unbelievably strong Kondo. To her, he was a monstrous opponent, a master beyond imagination. Carrera had always known she was good, but this battle made her realize there was always someone better. Kondo's strength and skill impressed and thrilled Carrera. She had faced formidable opponents before, Diablo, Zegion, Velgrynd, but Kondo's quick work of her showcased his mastery. Despite this, Carrera felt a sense of exhilaration. Rolling on the ground to create distance, she stood up, sword pointed straight at Kondo. She acknowledged his superiority, and despite Kondo's scathing remark about her brute strength, the respect between them was clear. Kondo, sensing the need to give his all from the beginning, had used the ultimate skill Sandalphon, Lord of Judgment, but still couldn't finish Carrera off. Their fierce battle continued, with Carrera's forceful blows and Kondo's precise parries. Kondo aimed a dispel bullet at Carrera, designed to disable her magic. In response, Carrera invoked a gravitational force field around the arena, intending to slow Kondo's movements. However, Kondo counteracted it with the dispel bullet, showcasing his versatility. The ultimate skill Sandalphon had 4 effects: removal bullet, dispel bullet, necrosis bullet, and eraser bullet, all of which Kondo could use as needed. Carrera's magical attacks, requiring spellcasting time, were consistently cancelled by Kondo's accurate shots. His ability to fire any bullet at the right moment meant that even a single hit could be a painful blow to Carrera. One moment off her guard, and the duel would be over instantly. Kondo's analytical, mechanical approach contrasted sharply with Carrera's emotionally driven style. By spotting weak points, understanding magical flows, and countering them precisely, Kondo had become the strongest in the Imperial armies. Carrera admired his skill, but found his explanation of predicting her magic casting to be too simplistic. Despite her annoyance, Carrera couldn't hide her joy at facing a worthy opponent. Fighting at full force was a rare pleasure, and Kondo provided exactly that. The fight was more important to her than the outcome, and she relished the challenge he presented. As they clashed, Carrera noticed a quirk in Kondo's technique. His left hand held the sword, while the right aimed the gun. When he fired, his eyes and finger muscles moved in tandem, revealing the bullet's trajectory. Carrera exploited this flaw with perfect timing, causing Kondo to lose his gun. "Let's see you pick on me now. I've just taken away one of your weapons," Carrera declared, her strike leaving Kondo off balance and disarmed. The Nambu semi-automatic clattered to the ground. Carrera was delighted to have this bit of revenge against Kondo. But then something gave her the creeps. As soon as she felt it, Carrera followed her instincts and jumped back from the spot. Kondo's sword cleaved through the air. Tsk! Missed my chance. The next thing that fell to the ground was Carrera's severed left arm. Not even her orichalc skeleton could resist the force behind Kondo's blade. Carrera, filled with rage and humiliation, understood the reality of her situation. Despite her anger, she remained calm enough to recognize Kondo's true strength. He had been looking down on her, using tricks to lure her into a vulnerable position. Now, holding his military sword with both hands, he revealed his true mastery, making it clear that he was more than a match for her, even without his gun. "How dare you damned human beings berate us?" Carrera shouted, stepping forward to attack Kondo. But just as she was about to strike, Agara, still transformed into a sword, spoke to her. "Lady Carrera, please wait." Carrera and Agara's thought communication allowed them to strategize in the heat of battle. Agara's calm persuasion helped Carrera see that Kondo's tactics were not out of disdain, but rather respect for her strength. Realizing this, Carrera calmed down and refocused on the fight. Striking herself to clear her mind, Carrera addressed Kondo with a newfound understanding. She acknowledged the cunning and skill humans possessed, surprising her. Carrera's realization underscored the importance of not underestimating her opponent. Her loyalty to Rimuru and her commitment to the battle renewed her resolve. Defeat was one thing, but death was unforgivable. Carrera's self-admonishment served as a statement of her resolve. Recognizing Kondo as a worthy adversary, she understood the need to take the battle seriously. Her initial conceit had made her underestimate him, but Agara's intervention helped her see the truth. Now, with her horrible smile, she was ready to go all out. "So the demon's treating this seriously now? A rather unwelcome turn of events for a hapless human such as I," Kondo remarked, his expression finally changing to one of recognition. He acknowledged Carrera as a worthy enemy and vowed to take the battle seriously. Donning his god-class armor, a spiritual outfit of pure white given to him by Ludora, Kondo's aura transformed. This uniform, modeled after the ceremonial uniform of the old Imperial Japanese Navy, symbolized his resolve and the guilt he carried for the men he had let die. Carrera, releasing her full magical force, reintroduced herself with pride. "I am Carrera, Menace Lord and faithful servant of the Demon Lord Sir Rimuru. By my pride, I swear I will kill you." Kondo responded, "I am Tatsuya Kondo, former lieutenant of the Imperial Japanese Navy and current commander of the Imperial Guardians, and I hereby accept your challenge." The two warriors stared each other down, quietly building up their power. With their renewed resolve and determination, the real battle was about to begin. Carrera reattached her arm with ease, demonstrating the remarkable regenerative capabilities granted by Rimuru. The conversation between her and Kondo remained light, yet both were vigilantly searching for an opening. Kondo, having given up his sidearm, was now fully committed to fighting with his sword, confident in his abilities. Kondo's unique skill, Decipherer, allowed him to fully grasp Carrera's movements and magical flow. Linked to the ultimate skill Sandalphon, this ability enhanced his perception far beyond the norm. He noticed the alarming growth of Carrera's power, a torrent of force unified by her will. Despite the grievous wound he had inflicted earlier, Carrera was fully healed and her energy concentrated into the demonic blade Agara had transformed into. The sight troubled Kondo as he realized Carrera was on the verge of obtaining an ultimate skill. Recognizing the danger, Kondo moved to eliminate her immediately. Donning his ceremonial uniform, a symbol of his dedication, he understood there was no room for defeat. Victory, by any means necessary, would determine right and wrong. Kondo, fully prepared, unleashed his power through his sword, directing fierce slashes at Carrera. The strength of his military sword was immense, its force amplified by the ultimate skill Sandalphon, which infused his will and soul into the blade. Despite her joy at the challenge, Carrera found herself hard-pressed to parry Kondo's relentless strikes. Agara's will within the demon blade was the only thing preventing it from breaking under the pressure. Each honed, heavy slash from Kondo made Carrera grunt in exertion. Kondo's true strength lay in the essence of his power, revealed only when he fought with everything he had. And while later, Carrera found herself overwhelmed by Kondo's relentless onslaught. He was determined to end the fight before she could awaken to her ultimate power, using every technique at his disposal to push her into a corner. Despite her attempts to strike back with ponderous force, Kondo deflected her attacks effortlessly, showcasing his superior fighting technique. Kondo's slashes, imbued with the power of eraser bullets and necrosis effects, wreaked havoc on Carrera's magic vessels, even affecting her link with Agara. Her attempts to heal herself were ineffective, and she realized the severity of her situation. Carrera was astonished by Kondo's strength and determination, recognizing the nobility of his character compared to her own carefree existence. The pain and struggle made Carrera understand that true power came from the will to acquire and master one's skills, not merely from having them given. Despite Agera's aid, Carrera was unable to match Kondo, finding herself on the verge of defeat. As the battle continued, Carrera's desperation grew. The possibility of being destroyed, even as one of the overlords of the all-powerful demons, loomed over her. Carrera's pride would never allow her defeat, especially as it would go against Rimuru's orders. She feared the consequences of failing him, knowing he might kill her repeatedly and still not be satisfied. The thought of not following Rimuru's orders terrified her. "I could never allow it," Carrera shouted, her bloodshot eyes fixated on Kondo. She forcefully regenerated her body, healing her wound and readying herself. Deeper and stronger than ever, she made a wish to defeat the man before her. Until now, she had relied on her overwhelming demon force, but it wasn't enough. She realized that those who wielded ultimate power, like Diablo and Kondo, were untouchable. It dawned on her that simply boosting her power was insufficient. To fight the truly powerful, she needed to understand herself more deeply and develop a strong will. In that crucial moment, Carrera, a spiritual life form, sought the power of will, the essence of everything. She felt something nagging her mind take shape, recognizing it as her determination. It was time to release this power and make it her own. But any ultimate power needs a name. Mind my power, let me give you a name. You will become my skill and release your force to fulfill the role Rimuru gave me. Your name is the ultimate skill Abaddon, Lord of Destruction. Abaddon, the Destroyer and King of the Abyss, was the perfect name for the Menace Lord. Carrera finally had the absolute, undeniable power to destroy everything. The ultimate skill Abaddon, Lord of Destruction, embodied all her desires, bringing certain destruction to her opponents. Meeting a truly powerful enemy made Carrera desire power for the first time. Just as Kondo was about to finish Carrera off, she awakened to her ultimate power, Abaddon, Lord of Destruction. It was a turn of events that Kondo hadn't anticipated, and he knew it was a terrible mistake. Despite his relentless attempts to deliver a fatal blow, Carrera kept getting back up. He had used his removal bullet to break through her barriers and the necrosis bullet to disrupt her magical flow. The eraser bullet should have sealed the deal, yet here she was, stronger than ever. In a moment of introspection, Kondo lamented not having any judgment bullets left. His ultimate weapon that could only be used once per day. He had used it previously to subdue Veldora, and now found himself in a dire situation without it. Yet he rallied himself, donning his ceremonial uniform and ready to fight with unwavering resolve. For the first time, he expressed his personal feelings to Carrera, calling out the unfairness of their battle. Carrera, recognizing the difference in their species, acknowledged Kondo's point, but countered that he was being unfair as well. She had already come to see him as her equal, a rare compliment from one of her kind. She pointed her sword at him, ready to unleash the full force of Abaddon, Lord of Destruction. Kondo, feeling a sense of foreboding, prepared for the worst as Carrera's magicules transformed into a massive energy force, filling the space between them with black and white light. The stage was set for an epic clash, with Carrera determined to show Kondo everything she had. Kondo had a bad feeling upon hearing that. But Carrera was a demon who cared very little about the feelings of other people. That gave the demon Lord Leon a hard time as well, although Carrera was just playing around at the time. It was a nasty thing to think, but from Kondo's point of view, Leon had it easy. He didn't have to deal with Carrera when she was truly serious, but Kondo did. Among the 4 Devil Lords, including Diablo, Carrera now boasted the largest magicule count. She hadn't been able to fully control it before, but with Abaddon, that shortcoming was a thing of the past. The current Carrera, in fact, could manipulate magic to an extent that rivaled Velgrynd. Let me grant you perdition. Vanish before me. Abyss annihilation. This was an ultimate magic, surpassing even gravity collapse, the greatest and most powerful attack magic, and Carrera's ideals in action. It worked by adding matter from the lowest of hellish abysses into a collapsed gravitational force field, generating an unfathomable torrent of extreme energy. It was, needless to say, extremely difficult to even point this energy at something, much less control it. It wasn't even meant to be invoked while standing on a planetary surface, but Carrera didn't hesitate to whip it out. One mistake controlling it could wipe out an entire planet, in fact. She had never successfully pulled it off during her practice sessions in the underworld, and this was the first time she ever tried it in the material world. It had never worked before, but she still didn't hesitate. If the other demonesses were here, they would have stopped her at any cost. But Carrera wasn't about to be held down now. Ajera was there, but telling Carrera to quit now would have been far too much to ask. If anything, the most frightened person in the arena was Ajera, not Kondo, because he knew exactly how dangerous this magic was. Kondo, meanwhile, detected the danger once Carrera began to invoke the skill, deploying Sandalphon before she made her final declaration. That quick assessment was Kondo's forte, but this time he had messed with the wrong opponent. Abyss Annihilation was an extremely large spell, one that could only work using Carrera's absurd magic force, and its range was just as gigantic. If this weren't another dimension, there was no telling how much damage it would cause. Kondo wondered if it could even destroy this entire dimension. If so, and if it was aimed at him like it was now, anything in the line of fire would be obliterated. That was Kondo's conclusion, and if this dimension was destroyed, it could even harm Emperor Ludora. His defenses were sound enough, yes, but this was an unprecedented attack. And that wasn't all. Now Kondo became aware of an even more troubling fact. Looking at Carrera's posture, even this vicious magic was just a decoy. Should he somehow survive this, he would likely then be struck by her real ace in the hole, a downward slash from her demon blade. If so, there was no way to counter it. The only way to survive was to brave every sacrifice and outslash the enemy. Kondo concluded that if this dimension was destroyed, it could even harm Emperor Ludora. His defenses were sound, but this was an unprecedented attack. He realized that Carrera's vicious magic was just a decoy. If he survived, her real ace would be a downward slash from her demon blade. There was no way to counter it. The only way to survive was to outslash the enemy, no matter the sacrifice. Kondo made up his mind. He sheathed his beloved sword and waited. As soon as Carrera activated her magic, he made his move. Risking it all, he drew his sword and executed multi-layered Blossom Flash. Right there, he reproduced the technique Hakuro had shown him, imbued with the power of a judgment bullet, which he was only allowed to use once per day. He had to exceed the limit here, or else face destruction. He gambled on his potential, firmly believing he could do it. The power of the soul shone brightly in the arena. Both sides were giving everything they had. Kondo's blade slashed through the frantic energy of Abyss Annihilation. Carrera's eyes widened, but a smile played on her lips. Intense pain racked Kondo's body. Even his god-class ceremonial robe couldn't resist the power of destruction. Unintimidated, Kondo aimed at Carrera's head and unleashed the 8 blossom slashes that gave Hakuro's move its name. Carrera ascended above him. Nice try. Now let me show you my greatest technique, for I have made Agera's experience my own. In a single moment, Carrera communicated her will to Kondo in the form of 100 sword flashes, all transcending his speed. This move, Crestwater 100 Flower Bloom, shattered Kondo's sword. Immediately after, Carrera's final blow made a diagonal slash across his body. In his final moments, Kondo felt the strength draining from his body and knew the end was near. He reflected on his life's incompleteness, realizing he had failed to protect his nation and keep his promise to Ludora. Filled with regret, Kondo recalled the promise he had made to his friend. "Tatsuya, may I ask you a favor?" Ludora had once asked him. "Yes, anything. I will do whatever I can to help as a friend," Kondo had replied. Ludora had wanted Kondo to stop him if he ever lost sight of his ideals. a burden too heavy for Damrada to bear. Right. I wanted to return the favor. I wanted to thank Ludora for calling me a friend, for giving me a reason to live in this world. But even so, that wish was such a cruel one. Long ago, I asked Damrada for a favor. I told him that should I ever lose sight of my ideals, I wanted him, my friend, to stop me. But I have now lived far too long, and Damrada is too kind a person to take my life with his own hands. I truly regret asking him for such a terrible favor. So, Kondo continued, his heart heavy with regret. Tatsuya, I know you will be able to reason through it calmly. You will be able to kill me, won't you? So please, you must interfere with Damrada's efforts and stop me with your own hands. Kondo didn't want to end Ludora's life. He admired him deeply. Ludora was an intelligent, reasonable man who always kept his eyes on the prize. He was like an idol to Kondo, someone he strived to emulate but never quite equaled. Ludora had saved Kondo from turning the blade on himself after failing to protect his home country, earning his admiration as a great hero. But Kondo understood Ludora's suffering. His body and soul had long since reached their limits. Ludora had reincarnated himself many times in his quest to control his special skill, Michael, Lord of Justice. Kondo's unique skill, Decipherer, allowed him to understand Ludora's situation better than anyone else, perhaps even Velgrynd, who was blinded by her love for Ludora. It was natural for Ludora to ask this favor of Kondo. Kondo had nodded and promised to fulfill it, understanding the gravity of the request. However, as he looked back, he realized there were irregularities in Ludora's behavior, cold eyes and heartless decisions that tormented Damrada. Kondo questioned when Damrada began to take serious actions towards this effort and if he had overlooked something crucial. He had interfered with Damrada as ordered, but now he saw that might have been a serious mistake. He had missed Ludora's transformation. When Kondo realized he had been under Michael's influence, he felt the gloom clear from his heart. He regretted not acting sooner to stop Ludora, thinking he could have made a difference. Now, with his body failing him, he could no longer fulfill his role. His life would end in regret, unable to alleviate Ludora's suffering or keep his promise. Kondo lay on the verge of death when he heard a voice rousing him from his slumber. Opening his eyes, he saw his enemy, Carrera, pouting and looking straight at him. The demon, with her shining blonde hair and dazzling smile, was truly beautiful. Kondo knew he was near death and couldn't continue fighting, but Carrera insisted, "Huh? But we haven't settled this yet. You can't do that." Despite his fading strength, Kondo smiled faintly at her words, recognizing the unfairness of the situation. He attempted to lift his body, but failed, feeling ashamed. Meanwhile, Carrera, filled with energy and determination, seemed free and pure. Kondo envied her. In a final act of desperation, Kondo asked Carrera for a favor. I have a favor. Use my gun to kill His Majesty." He entrusted his one and only role to his mortal enemy, knowing it was a foolish request. Carrera picked up the Nambu semi-automatic on the ground and remarked, "You mean this? It's broken." As Kondo's consciousness faded, he realized his naivety. No demon would be kind to him in his final moments. Carrera picked up the Nambu semi-automatic on the ground and remarked, "You mean this? It's broken." As Kondo's consciousness faded, he realized his naivety. No demon would be kind to him in his final moments. As he began to disintegrate from the fatal wound inflicted by Carrera, he found himself fading fast. His god-class ceremonial robe couldn't protect him from the power of destruction. Carrera surprisingly encouraged him. "Pfft, so you're going to give up just because you broke your toy here? After all the suffering you put me through, that's pretty weak. It was such a nice battle too. What a disappointment." With his last ounce of energy, Kondo smiled bitterly, acknowledging his own worthlessness. Carrera interrupted his fading consciousness, offering, "Wait, don't go on me yet. Maybe I'm willing to kill this emperor for you, huh?" Kondo, puzzled, listened as Carrera added, "Ugh, you're so slow on the uptake. What do I get out of it? Everybody knows that if you want a demon to work for you, you need an agreement. Carrera, by her nature, was not the type of demon you could easily negotiate with. However, for some reason, she felt inclined to do Kondo a favor. That didn't mean she would do it for free, though. Kondo couldn't help but smile at the sight of the flustered Carrera. Seeing his enemy, a powerful demon, acting shy and confused was oddly soothing. He knew his words were no longer audible, but he made a silent wish, hoping Carrera would understand. Carrera did. Your wish has been heard. By my name as Carrera the Menace Lord, our contract is complete. Your wish shall be granted, she declared solemnly. Kondo, with his last ounce of strength, moved his hand toward Carrera. His fingertips touched the Nambu semi-automatic she held, and the gun glowed a golden shade. Kondo's power transformed it, rebirthing it as a god-class weapon. Through this transformation, Kondo's soul passed over to Carrera. However, his heart core did not transfer. Carrera expected this. The heart core of someone who had attained enlightenment and absolved themselves of all sin could never be reborn. It was released from the cycle of reincarnation and traveled to the Promised Land, a state of liberation. This realization made Carrera a little sad. Pfft, this isn't funny. It's been a long time since I had an opponent with some actual backbone, Carrera muttered. As she spoke, she felt an urge to merge the ultimate skill Abaddon, Lord of Destruction, with Sandalphon, Lord of Judgment. The golden glow of the gun brightened, as if to tell her she would no longer be alone. The gun had become Carrera's new partner, a memento of Kondo. "Oh, so you're with me now," she said. The light from the gun seemed to blink in response, and Carrera began to feel a surge of power flowing into her. Kondo's voice echoed in her mind. "The way you use your power is far too careless. I will help you, so you must make sure to use me better than that." In an instant, she understood everything and made Kondo's ability her own. "How is that any of your business? Stop treating me like a child," Carrera retorted, finding comfort in his presence. She stood up, ready to continue. "Congratulations on your splendid victory. I, Agera, am thoroughly impressed," Agera said, despite his injuries. "You too. Good job surviving that and all," Carrera replied. "Heh, heh. It's very embarrassing to receive praise from you, you know," Agera admitted. Despite being wounded, he was smiling, satisfied with the battle's outcome. "This man Kondo, he was a descendant of one of your trainees, wasn't he?" Agera asked. "It would appear so," Carrera confirmed. "Guess I shouldn't treat all humans like idiots, given the way they can inherit and accumulate skills and everything," Agera said, nodding happily. "But seeing how much stronger he was than you was a surprise," Carrera added, her smile fading. But only because he was a truly exceptional man. If we had fought with swords alone, I am positive I would have won," Agera claimed. "Yeah, right," Carrera laughed. They were both sore losers, living united in their shared experiences. Quickly as they laughed, his composure, Carrera noticed a despite his initial dimension, he began searching for Benimaru's weak points. Granit was determined to finish this fight's just getting started. Overwhelming Carrera said, confident that his victory was certain. Of course, he believed that Benimaru didn't possess any hidden transformation skills in the hearts of those who dare to stand in her way. Benimaru unexpectedly parried Granit's powerful move, following her despite his near-fatal injuries. Quaking blast with his sword, the enemy was leaving Granit stunned, and they had a promise to Granit's fulfill. Equipment was god-class, the third-rank making it unbelievable that Benimaru's was a legendary hero who had supported the Empire from its inception. Benimaru had obtained an instrumental in laying the foundation for the Empire's 1,000 years of peace. He was glorified as a god of war. Benimaru had acquired his new power at the moment he had disappeared from the public eye, realizing he remained alive and well. He would have serving as the Emperor's close confidant, shifting his focus. 4 nights, Benimaru unleashed his ultimate skill, a skilled warrior versed in all manner of weapons and fighting techniques. His sword, magnificent, took on a black glow, symbolizing his over 2,000 and rendering him nearly invincible. His slicked-back, short black hair, the magical flame gave him combined with Benimaru's swordsmanship. Now he was facing off against Benimaru. The Granit, living up to his god men squared off in the center, quickly regained his composure. Granit summoned all his might as the guardian of the Empire. While Benimaru identified himself as the second in command of the demon lord, but it harmlessly passed through Despite Benimaru's readiness to fight, Granit paused, asking if Benimaru's mind was filled with Granit complimented Benimaru's strengths, explaining that his research indicated Benimaru was exceptionally powerful Carrera's skills. Despite Benimaru's irritation, Granit continued, expressing disappointment in Kondo's handling of intelligence and offering a proposition. He suggested Benimaru join his side and serve under him, promising to take responsibility for Benimaru and his followers. Benimaru saw through Granit's offer, understanding that Granit wanted to use him and his comrades to strengthen the empire. Assessing Granit calmly, Benimaru questioned what would become of Rimuru. Granit admitted that Rimuru was dangerous and needed to be defeated to confirm Benimaru's allegiance. Realizing that Granit intended for the monsters to eliminate each other, Benimaru felt his annoyance grow. The idea of betraying Rimuru was too outrageous to consider. Benimaru dismissed the idea of betraying Rimuru, declaring, "How ridiculous, we would never stab Sir Rimuru in the back." He had been stalling for time, having heard a comforting voice in his mind suggesting a modification to the power he craved. Normally, he would never agree to such a thing, but for some reason he did. Benimaru had evolved into a flame soul ogre, a spiritual life form, and wanted to acquire an ultimate skill by his own hand, inspired by his experience with Rimuru. He had become enlightened, integrating his power of fire with his unique skill, Born Leader. His beloved sword Gurren, reforged by Kurobi to attain God class, was now enhanced with dark flame, making him nearly unbeatable. As Benimaru was on the verge of reaching his ultimate peak, he decided to see what changes his approval would bring. This was why he agreed to talk with Granit. However, when Granit suggested betraying Rimuru, Benimaru regretted it deeply. The suggestion offended him, and he drew his sword, pointing it at Granit. Granit, unfazed, responded, Whoa, it's not good to have a short fuse like that. Monsters are all about survival of the fittest, aren't they? Aren't you supposed to serve and follow the strong? And don't monsters switch masters all the time?" Hearing this made Benimaru's blood boil. As the commander-in-chief of the monster forces, he prided himself on controlling his anger, but this was too much. He mocked himself, realizing he couldn't laugh at Cheyenne any longer, and decided not to hold back his anger. "Draw your blade. There is no meaning to further conversation," Benimaru demanded. Granit, shaking his head, replied, "Oh brother, I don't understand. This is both an extension of mercy and the greatest concession you could ever receive from me. Out of great respect for your position, I was allowing you to serve under me without anyone having to be hurt." Granit sounded mystified, genuinely believing he could overwhelm Benimaru. Fully aware of Granit's confidence, Benimaru grew more incensed by the moment. He hadn't started attacking yet, because he wanted Granit to truly regret his words. "So are you keeping this chat going because you want to make excuses about your defeat?" Benimaru asked, his patience wearing thin. Granit laughed, "Ha ha ha ha. What a thing to say. I like your spirit, but you should really know your place here. Yes, my men were perhaps too proud for their own good, and all of them are now defeated. It would shame me to even show my face to His Majesty right now, but if you would only nod your head at me, we'd have more strength than ever before. I'd be happy, and even better, you wouldn't have to die. We can build a good relationship that way, can't you see? And now that I've given you my offer, do you understand what's at stake here? I'm not at all the sort to use you and your people as discardable pawns, you see." Despite Benimaru's obvious annoyance, Granit pressed on, speaking with the air of a hero and a sincere, guileless approach. He urged Benimaru to consider the soldiers and officers he could save with a single decision. Granit boasted about his strength and that of his allies, Damrada and Kondo, emphasizing the near impossibility of defeating the Emperor and his guardians. Benimaru thought Granit had a loose tongue, and his anger diffused slightly. Deciding to see what else he could learn, Benimaru tolerated the conversation. He noted how the Emperor had Kondo under his control, suggesting Ludora had a domination skill. "Of all the irresponsible things to say to me, it's a little surprising to hear you decide for us that we can't win. Besides, even if I said yes, I have no interest in having our hearts and minds all be controlled by you, Benimaru responded. Granit laughed again. Ha ha ha, have I piqued your interest? Well, I'm sure I have. I understand that you ogres have long served as talented mercenaries, so I assumed you might be interested in joining me under the right conditions. And fear not, as you said, His Majesty can indeed control people's minds, but there's hardly any point worrying about it, is there? Granit attempted to persuade Benimaru to join the Empire, arguing that being ruled over was an honor, even if one was unaware of it. He cited Kondo as an example, claiming that Kondo was also ruled over without realizing it. Granit believed that Benimaru and his companions were not worth dominating due to their perceived weakness, which reignited Benimaru's anger. Despite Granit's reasoning, Benimaru found the logic flawed and offensive. Granit's natural and sincere declaration that Benimaru's team was weak only fueled Benimaru's frustration. Granit continued to explain that while Benimaru and his team were strong as enemies, joining the Empire would allow them to move freely without mind control. Confident in his own strength, Benimaru suggested settling their differences through actions rather than words. He adjusted his sword, realizing further conversation would only agitate him more. Granit sighed, lamenting the difficulty of dealing with monsters, and considered negotiating with Xion instead. Benimaru warned against it, noting Xion's hard-headedness. Intrigued by Benimaru's knowledge of Minaza, Granit questioned how he obtained such information. Benimaru attributed his thoroughness to Rimuru's teachings, impressing Granit but also making him regret the potential loss of such a formidable opponent. Granit finally drew his sword, feeling most comfortable with a familiar weapon in his hand. As he held it up to Benimaru, his demeanor changed completely. The previously calm and composed Granit now radiated an air of supremacy that could intimidate even a god ogre. His short hair stood on end, personifying the expression, hair-raising havoc. Granit quoted an old expression from another world, "Ask not the sparrow how the eagle soars." It means that the little people cannot understand the thoughts of the greats, and that describes you perfectly. You should have obeyed me while I was being gentler in my advice. Benimaru, having had enough of Granit's lectures, responded with irritation. Granit, fully convinced of his impending victory, unleashed his maximum power with the move Army Destroyer, Quaking Blast. Granit was skilled in enemy analysis, capable of discerning the combat abilities of his opponents through a skill called Read Enemy Status, granted to him by Ludora via Alternate. This skill gave him an accurate grasp of Benimaru's power, leading him to believe there was no way he could be defeated. Red Enemy Status wasn't foolproof. It couldn't gauge the full power of someone who had awakened to an ultimate skill. However, by gauging magicule counts, Granit deemed Benimaru, Soei, Xion, and the demons as non-threats. Granit saw potential in Benimaru, an enterprising monster on the verge of discovering his ultimate skill. However, as he stood, Benimaru was no match for Granit. With a significantly higher amount of magicules, Granit confidently decided that Benimaru posed no threat. Granit wasn't being conceited or careless. He understood that an enemy with an ultimate skill could present a challenge depending on its nature. An extended fight could lead to an awakening if the enemy felt their life was in danger. However, Granit believed that a mere conversation wouldn't trigger such an awakening. Granit was determined to finish Benimaru off with overwhelming force, confident that his victory was certain. He believed that Benimaru didn't possess any hidden transformation skill like the lycanthropes. However, something unexpected occurred. Benimaru harmlessly parried Granit's powerful move, Army Destroyer, Quaking Blast, with his sword, a sight that left Granit stunned. Granit's equipment was god class, making it unbelievable that Benimaru's sword could withstand it. Granit shouted in disbelief, unable to comprehend how Benimaru had obtained an ultimate skill without showing any prior signs. This revelation threw Granit into a panic, even though Benimaru remained outwardly calm. Benimaru, despite his calm facade, had indeed obtained his new power at the moment he stopped Granit's blade. The timing had been critical, and he realized that without this power, he would have suffered severe damage or even death. Reflecting on his close call, Benimaru felt grateful for the new power he had acquired. Shifting his focus, Benimaru prepared to unleash his newly acquired ultimate skill, Amaterasu, Lord of Shimmering Flame. His sword, Guren, took on a black glow, symbolizing his authority and rendering him nearly invincible. The magical flame, combined with Benimaru's swordsmanship, made him immensely powerful. Benimaru's ultimate skill, Amaterasu, derived from Velgryn's abilities, included the skill Dominate Heat, which accelerated his body and allowed him to release sword slashes at divine speed. Naming his attack Crestwater Dark Flame 100 Flower Bloom, Benimaru turned away with a refreshed expression. Granit's defeat was caused by bad luck and his failure to strike Benimaru when he had the chance. Benimaru vowed not to repeat Granit's mistake. Velgrynd grew increasingly concerned as she realized she had lost communication with her separate body, which Rimuru had consumed. Any attempts to project her thoughts were swallowed by the abyss, and pouring energy into her other body felt futile. With approximately half of her total energy lost and her parallel existence defeated, she struggled to maintain her composure. Now operating at only 20% of her magicules, she concluded that it was impossible to defeat Rimuru and decided that fleeing was her best option. Velgrynd decided to abandon her guard duty at the gate, noting that she hadn't yet faced any attackers. As she moved back outside the gate, she encountered a few figures in the room with the 8 gates. Among them was Testarossa, who was relaxing and sipping tea as if she owned the place. Testarossa's presence was a great annoyance to Velgrynd, considering the urgency of her situation. Despite Velgrynd's superior power, Testarossa displayed confidence and a readiness to engage. Velgrynd, angered, greeted Testarossa with a fist, creating a shockwave that shattered the table and chairs, causing Esprit and Zonda to evacuate. Testarossa's strategy was clear. She didn't need to win. She only needed to buy time. Velgrynd's heat was so intense that touching her would result in being burned to cinders, and her speed was unmatched. Despite having only 20% of her magicules, Velgrynd still had nearly 10 times more than Testarossa, illustrating the significant gap in their power levels. Testarossa remained relaxed, knowing that stalling for time was her goal, rather than winning. Velgrynd expressed her frustration, but Testarossa responded with calm confidence. Despite being unable to defeat Velgrynd in a direct match, Testarossa found it easier to harass her. She believed that even if she couldn't hold out until the other officers arrived, Rimuru would soon appear, securing her victory. The clash between the two opponents was intense, with red and white streaks crossing paths in the air. Testarossa's movements were graceful and elegant, contrasting with Velgryn's harsh and intense attacks. As they faced off without making contact, Velgrynd noticed a significant change in Testarossa. Testarossa casually revealed that she had acquired an ultimate skill, Belial, Lord of the Underworld, which governed life and death, leaning more towards death. This new power intrigued Testarossa as it aligned with her nature. Defeat was a humiliation she could never admit to, and this applied to the defeat of death as well. For a demon to evolve, they needed to accumulate power and age for at least 2,000 years, making any defeat unforgivable. Death meant annihilation and a return to hell, so even a draw was preferable to fleeing a battle. Testarossa, understanding that a spiritual life form is heavily influenced by its own mind, knew that admitting defeat would lead to actual defeat. There were a few demons like Diablo who had perfect undefeated records, but they were rare. Testarossa believed that as long as she kept challenging Zegion, it wouldn't count as a defeat until she won. Facing Velgrynd, Testarossa resolved to never flee, convinced that persistence would eventually lead to victory. She had recently acquired an ultimate skill, Belial, Lord of the Underworld, after realizing her inadequacies in their previous battle. This new power allowed her to face her desires and better hone her abilities. Velgrynd, who possessed Raguel, Lord of Relief, understood the significance of Testarossa's transformation. Their battle became a dance of red and white streaks, each opponent moving with incredible speed and precision. Just as Velgrynd's rage peaked, an explosion shook the chamber, drawing her attention. Carrera, visibly wounded, emerged from one of the gates, followed by Esprit, Zonda, and Agera. She greeted Testarossa, asking to join the fight despite her injuries. Ultima also appeared, taking a seat next to Carrera, with Veyrun setting up a chair for her. The arrival of these demons, along with Xion, Soei, and Benimaru, made Velgrynd realize that all the powerful forces on her side had been defeated. Testarossa had achieved a tactical victory, and the hopes of Ludora and Velgrynd were about to be crushed. The battlefield experienced a sudden and rapid cooldown as Laplas and Vega ran toward Kigali. The forbidden curse, Dead Birthday, had ceased functioning when Velgrynd stopped aiding Kigali. The number of walking dead produced by the spell was unknown, and it was crucial to take command of them before anyone else. Laplas realized that Lieutenant Kondo, who led the ritual, was likely aware of this. By the time Laplace reached the scene, a group of Imperial officers was carrying Kigali and her entourage into a military vehicle. A kind-looking man in a bright red uniform, identified as Feldway, approached Laplace. Feldway, ranked 10th within the Empire, was expected to function as a space in case one of the single digits dropped out. Feldway's appearance was unassuming, but his flashy uniform drew attention. Laplace, understanding the need for caution, engaged in a conversation with Feldway, who revealed his rank and role. Impatient, Vega wanted to crush Feldway, but Laplace stopped him, emphasizing the need for caution while Kigali was held hostage. Footman and Teare were still fighting hard against the crowds around them. Laplace was cautiously trying to feel out the other side when he was interrupted by an unexpected visitor. Yuki Kagurazaka, his former boss, appeared and accused Laplace of being a traitor, urging Vega to help take him down. Laplace immediately fled, sensing a murderous rage. He pleaded with Yuki to snap out of it, but his plea went unheeded. Yuki, showing no hesitation, attacked Laplace. Vega, seeing this, smiled and asked if he could eat Laplace after defeating him. Yuki agreed, and Vega gleefully launched his attack. Laplace found himself in a dire situation, facing both Yuki and Vega. He realized that escaping was not an option, as Feldway had cast Dominate Space over the battle zone, preventing his teleportation. Despite the odds, Laplace decided to reveal his true power, hoping to break Yuki's mind control. As Vega and Yuki continued their relentless attacks, Laplace fought back with all his might. He kicked at Vega, momentarily incapacitating him. Laplace then faced Yuki, a situation that Laplace found deeply troubling. Just as Yuki's fist was about to strike Laplace, Diablo intervened, stopping the attack and revealing that he had come to save Laplace at Rimuru's behest. Diablo's intervention was unexpected, and his presence brought a mix of relief and suspicion to Laplace. Despite his gratitude, Laplace couldn't help but feel wary of Diablo's motives, recognizing the manipulative nature behind Diablo's smile. With Diablo's help, the situation turned in Laplace's favor. It's all started when Diablo watching Rimuru's fight with Velgrynd. However, Rimuru soon arrived, questioning Diablo's actions and scolding him for his behavior. This interaction highlighted Rimuru's unique ability to manage Diablo's self-serving tendencies. Then Diablo had been tasked with identifying and eliminating suspicious individuals, not specifically to save Laplace. With Moss's report in hand, Diablo arrived on the scene, intending to restore his reputation in Rimuru's eyes. Confident in his eventual success, Diablo addressed the situation with a mixture of disdain and determination. Upon spotting Feldway, Diablo identified him as a mystic lord allied with Ludora. Feldway, recognizing Diablo as the primal noir from Kondo's investigation, acknowledged his presence. Diablo, now going by his new name, issued a stern warning to Feldway, asserting his readiness to protect Rimuru at all costs. Feldway, glaring at Diablo with intense hatred, understood the futility of engaging in a battle with him. After exchanging a few pointed glares, Feldway decided to withdraw, leaving the confrontation for another day. Diablo also issued a final warning to Feldway, asserting his ability to kill him if necessary. With their confrontation seemingly resolved, both moved on, ignoring each other's presence. Feldway then took charge, instructing Kagali and Yuuki to prepare for their return to the flagship, expressing concern for His Majesty. Yoki, acknowledging the orders, dropped his fighting stance and joined Vega, who unsteadily stood up and followed. Footman and Tear were also called back, and Feldway utilized his dominate space ability to teleport everyone, including the newborn walking dead, away from the battlefield. Diablo remained on the scene, conferring with Moss. Now that he knew their enemy was a mystic lord, he resolved that he was the only one who could effectively fight back. Reluctantly, he decided to clean up the mess. With Footman and Tear retreating, the battle on the ground ended. Diablo confirmed everyone's safety and attended to the injured. Moss, being competent and connected to Benimaru, assisted him. Once Feldway and the others left, Diablo teleported himself up to the flagship. Meanwhile, Laplace was left alone. "Great, left behind again," he muttered, shrugging. With the chaos subsiding, Rimuru surveyed the battlefield, noting the significant damage to the forest, but finding the capital city of Rimuru mostly intact. Geld and his forces had done an excellent job protecting the city. Diablo, who had been observing the battle against Velgrynd, was confronted by Rimuru. Feeling watched during the battle, Rimuru expressed his frustration. Diablo attempted to explain that he was ensuring no one interfered, but Rimuru instructed him to join the others who were working hard. Diablo, giving a sad puppy dog look, reluctantly complied. Ciel, sensing the situation, commented on Diablo's unnecessary presence. Despite the annoyance, Rimuru could finally relax and return to dealing with Velgrynd, leaving it to Veldora to handle matters with her. Upon checking in with Veldora, Rimuru found him deflecting Velgrynd's rage by blaming Rimuru for everything. Veldora claimed that Rimuru had prevented him from reassuring his sister, likening his behavior to a spoiled child blaming his friends to avoid getting yelled at. Leaving the persuasion effort to Veldora had clearly been a mistake. Rimuru understood why Veldora wouldn't want to face Velgrynd, given her fit of rage when she thought he was dead. However, Veldora pushing all the trouble onto Rimuru was frustrating and counterproductive. Realizing that he needed to handle the situation himself, Rimuru prepared to explain to Velgrynd that she was in the same position as Veldora. Before he could do that, Ciel reported a critical finding. Velgrynd was under the domination of someone, likely Ludora. Ciel offered to lift the influence, leaving Rimuru to decide the next step. The casual delivery of this bombshell left Rimuru momentarily speechless. Although he had expected Ciel to analyze Velgrynd, discovering she was being mind-controlled was shocking. Rimuru confirmed Ludora was likely the culprit, noting that Granit had essentially admitted to the Empire's manipulative tactics. Facing the dilemma of what to do with Velgrynd, Rimuru considered his options carefully. Veldora proved unreliable, often deflecting blame and making Rimuru out to be the bad guy. Considering Velgrynd was under Ludora's mental influence, Rimuru doubted she would listen to him directly. Ciel suggested appointing Velgrynd to the same position as Veldora, connecting a soul corridor to her and transforming her into an ultimate skill. Rimuru questioned if this was possible, but Ciel assured him that he had enough magicules to accomplish it, equivalent to a true dragon. Rimuru worried this might take away Velgrynd's free will, but Ciel reassured him that it wouldn't, much like Veldora's situation. Even with a soul corridor, Veldora retained his freedom, acting independently and even deflecting blame onto Rimuru to save himself. Rimuru realized Velgrynd would likely be the same, and giving her the same status as Veldora could prove his innocence and avoid further misunderstandings. If Velgrynd and Veldora fought, it wouldn't be Rimuru's problem. Ciel offered to place restrictions on Velgrynd to ease Rimuru's anxiety, but Rimuru was hesitant. He didn't want to force her into anything, believing it would make him no better than Ludora. He considered keeping her isolated in complex space if she didn't join his side willingly. Rimuru now faced the challenge of handling Velgrynd, who was under Ludora's influence. Determined to address the situation directly, Rimuru approached Velgrynd within his complex space, only to find her rampaging and demanding to be released. Despite the awkwardness of the situation, Rimuru extended his hand towards Velgrynd and unlocked Ludora's control, connecting a soul corridor to her. The change was immediate. Velgrynd, initially wild with anger, calmed down, surprising even herself. Veldora, observing this, questioned Rimuru about his actions, leading to a brief argument between the two. Velgrynd demanded an explanation, confused by the new connection and the inability to communicate with her separate body. Rimuru explained that he had connected a soul corridor to her, making it impossible for her to communicate unless she opened her heart to him. This measure was taken to ensure she couldn't be controlled by Ludora any longer. With the influence lifted, Rimuru hoped to build trust and cooperation with Velgrynd, ensuring that she wouldn't interfere with their plans. He somewhat flustered as Velgrynd, a beautiful woman now freed from Ludora's control, demanded answers. Ciel provided a full explanation, detailing how Velgrynd's main consciousness was free, but her separate body was still under Ludora's influence. Ciel had used unlimited imprisonment to block the flow of information from Rimuru's side, creating a one-way communication street. Rimuru suggested analyzing the differences between Velgrynd's two consciousnesses to prove she had been under mind control. Veldora attempted to reassure his sister, but Velgrynd silenced him, leaving Rimuru somewhat satisfied to see Veldora reprimanded. Velgrynd, now deep in thought, tried to understand the situation. Rimuru, meanwhile, kept an eye on the flagship through the eyes of his companions, noting that the battle was nearing its end. This development was crucial for Velgrynd to see, as it would help her grasp the full extent of the situation and the sincerity of Rimuru's intentions. Velgrynd's weakened state didn't deter her opponents from surrounding her, as they knew even then she posed a formidable threat. The alternate dimension she had created was collapsing, and just when it seemed inevitable, Diablo effortlessly destroyed it with a few hits. As Veldora and Rimuru watched, Carrera moved in with a golden handgun and shot Ludora. Velgrynd, in a desperate attempt to protect him, used her incredible speed to catch the bullet, but it still managed to blow off her right arm and hit Ludora. Surprisingly, Ludora was unharmed, protected by a barrier. Rimuru and Veldora were both shocked by how Ludora could cancel out such a powerful attack. Velgrynd, realizing the truth, admitted that she had been under Ludora's control. She explained that Ludora's ironclad protection system relied on the loyalty of his subjects and associates, and while the barrier was perfect, it immobilized Ludora, preventing him from taking any action. Castle Guard, one of the greatest features of Michael, Lord of Justice, had just stopped Carrera's judgment bullet, making Ludora seemingly invincible. Unable to attack while Castle Guard was active, Ludora relied on his associates for battle. Velgrynd, realizing her mistake in protecting Ludora, acknowledged that she had been under mind control. In a shocking turn, Ludora momentarily removed Castle Guard and stabbed Velgrynd, revealing that the man she once loved was no more. Instead, he was replaced by Michael, Lord of Justice, who laughed and declared his intent to use Velgrynd's power. This revelation shocked everyone, including Velgrynd, who explained that Ludora had reached his limits long ago, reincarnating himself to the point of wearing out his soul. Michael, a power given by Veldanova, had taken over, while Uriel, Lord of Vows, was acquired by Ludora on his own. As Ludora, now Michael, possessed Velgrynd's power, the situation grew increasingly complex. Velgrynd revealed that Ludora's repeated reincarnations had weakened his soul, making it difficult for him to control Michael, Lord of Justice. This led to the impression that the skill had betrayed Ludora. However, Rimuru and Ciel understood that Michael, having evolved into a Manus with free will, was pursuing his own goals, contrary to Ludora's original intentions. Rimuru explained that Michael aimed to resurrect Veldanova, willing to make any sacrifices necessary. This revelation shocked Velgrynd, as it became clear that they couldn't let Michael's plan succeed. At that moment, the mystic Lord Feldway reappeared, targeting the weakened Velgrynd with his Dominate Space ability. Feldway boasted about erasing Velgrynd from the world, leaving only 2 true dragons. Rimuru stopped Benimaru and Diablo from reacting, wanting to observe Ludora, Michael's response. A strange substance from Ludora's body clung to Velgrynd, indicating that her power had transferred to Michael. Ludora, or Michael, now in possession of Velgrynd's power, declared that capturing Veldora and Velzard's power would complete Veldanova's resurrection. While they talking, Velgrynd sensed a piece of Ludora's soul. Desperate to reach it, she begged Rimuru, who used Mind Accelerate to stretch out time and calm her down. Rimuru warned that if she acted impulsively, she might be taken over by Ludora again. Velgrynd's emotions were raw, expressing her true feelings of not wanting to give up on Ludora. Ciel, speaking through Rimuru, offered a possibility: ability adjust. Velgrynd quickly accepted the offer, desperate to fulfill her wish. Upon agreeing, Velgrynd began to feel more at ease as a voice confirmed her will. The first step was to cut out the interference on Raguel, Lord of Relief, emblazoned deep inside her heart core. This interference had been dangerous, and removing it brought a sense of relief and clarity to her. Then she realized that the ultimate skill, Michael, King of Justice, had a power that acted as a counterpart to Regalia Dominion. These powers, created by Veldanova in their pure form, were referred to as angelic, and could not resist the absolute control of Michael's ultimate dominion. Velgrynd's Raguel was no exception, and a narrow corridor had connected it to Michael, making it impossible for her to escape his influence. Understanding why she was controlled, Velgrynd felt hopeless. But as she was about to give up, she heard a strange, powerful, yet tender voice. This voice was Ciel's, and it informed her that the preparations for Raguel, Lord of Relief, were complete, and it would be merged with Uriel, Lord of Vows. Velgrynd, confused and surprised, questioned if this meant she would be given Uriel or what the merge entailed. Ciel explained that modifying the ability would free it from Michael's control, creating a new ability exclusively for Velgrynd. Velgrynd only cared about one thing: if she could then search for Ludora. Ciel affirmed that it was possible. Without hesitation, Velgrynd gave her consent, filled with hope. The moment Ciel activated Ability Adjust, an unbelievable surge of power enveloped Velgrynd. Ciel announced the successful creation of the ultimate skill Cthugha, Lord of the Fire God, merging Raguel and Uriel. At that moment, Velgrynd was freed from all her constraints. When Rimuru nodded in agreement with Ciel's words, the essence of Uriel was transferred over, leaving him stunned. The Uriel that was merged was only a remnant, its essence taken over by the new skill Shub-Niggurath, Lord of Abundance. This revelation left Rimuru with a million questions, sensing that Ciel had been doing remarkable things without his knowledge. Despite his curiosity, Rimuru focused on Velgrynd, glad that everything had worked out. "Congratulations, Velgrynd. Now it's safe to release you outside," Rimuru said, smiling at her. Velgrynd stared back at him, her face contorted with a mix of emotions. Understanding why, Rimuru looked away, giving her a moment. Velgrynd had many questions, but she set them aside for now. "So, are you going to let me go?" she asked. Rimuru nodded. Ciel informed him that with Uriel now merged, Velgrynd would be able to pick up on and react to Ludora's soul, potentially finding and retrieving the fragment she had sensed. Rimuru began to wonder if the remnant Ciel mentioned was the core of Uriel, taking the shape of Ludora's own heart. This meant Velgrynd would always be with Ludora in some form, even if his soul was scattered across the world. Rimuru believed that Velgrynd might just succeed in her quest. "Okay now, release," Rimuru declared. The three of them returned from the spiritual world to the real one. Time was still stretched out for them as they said their goodbyes. "Thank you, Rimuru. I'm sorry for all the trouble," Velgrynd said, her voice filled with gratitude. Rimuru kept his complaints to himself, not wanting to anger her. "I'm sure you can connect with your parallel existence now, so I don't think you need to worry about getting lost. After that, I know things are going to be tough for you. But good luck." He offered his support. Veldora, with a big smile, added, "My sister, please don't forget. If things don't work out, I'll always be here, so don't wail in despair. Just do the best you can." Velgrynd seemed at a loss for how to respond. "You really are stupid, aren't you?" "Ah, my stupid, cute little brother. I'm glad you're all right," she said with a shy smile. Then she stared back at Rimuru, making his heart race with nervousness. "Well, see you later," Velgrynd said, shaking her head in exasperation as she teleported away gracefully. Rimuru prepared to support Benimaru and the others in their ongoing battle against Michael and Feldway. Less than a minute had passed, and the attacks on Michael were still in progress. Despite Castle Guard blocking everything, they continued their efforts, knowing that stopping would allow the enemy to strike back. Benimaru and Diablo watched from the sidelines, ensuring Shion and the others didn't cease their relentless assault. With only 2 enemies left, Rimuru was eager to defeat them. But as long as Castle Guard was active, nothing would work against Michael. Feldway, laughing loudly, attempted to throw Rimuru's friends into an alternate dimension. Seizing the opportunity, Rimuru intervened, blocking Feldway's move. "Demon Lord Rimuru," Feldway muttered. "Hello, Mystic Lord Feldway. Good to meet you," Rimuru responded sarcastically. The smile vanished from Feldway's face. "Some country hick with no understanding of etiquette? Huh? I don't need to be told that by an aggressor who's dying to live in the big city," Rimuru retorted, his continued provocation freezing Feldway's expression. Feldway, who seemed to let his anger build without snapping, was proving difficult to deal with. At that moment, Michael, who had been silently observing, spoke up, looking composed as usual. "Heh heh heh. Weren't you hiding and observing me? I thought you were sacrificing your friends in order to find a way to attack us." Michael's accusation was partly accurate, except for the sacrifice part, which Rimuru dismissed. "Think whatever you want about me. You want to settle this here?" "Heh, bold of you. But do you really think you can beat me?" Michael challenged, a smirk on his face. Rimuru faced Michael and Feldway with a bold declaration, threatening to burn their empire to the ground if it meant protecting his friends. Though it was a bluff, Rimuru's resolve was clear. His words made Michael reconsider, leading to a silent contemplation. Realizing the gravity of Rimuru's threat, Michael decided to retreat. Feldway, surprised by this decision, questioned it, but ultimately followed Michael's lead. Michael acknowledged that it was too early for a full confrontation, as it would end badly for both sides. Rimuru was relieved that the immediate threat was averted, knowing that they had bought themselves more time to prepare. As Michael and Feldway left, Rimuru used his observation magic, Argos, the Eye of God, to ensure they weren't heading back to the Empire. Everything appeared normal, with no unusual activity reported by Moss. Benimaru, noticing Rimuru's relief, suggested they celebrate their safety and return home. Rimuru agreed, feeling the exhaustion of the day's events and the need for a moment of respite. They decided to ask Shuna to prepare a feast, a welcome idea that brought smiles to everyone's faces. "Okay, let's go back and have a blast," Rimuru announced, bringing a sense of joy and camaraderie to his team. They had work left to do, but for now they could celebrate their survival and cherish the bond that held them together. Velgrynd continued her journey. Yesterday, today, and tomorrow, she walks on, never stopping. The place she flew to after leaving Rimuru was another world, in another time. Feldway had sent her parallel existence to the rift between this world and that one, and she safely reintegrated herself with it right there. This was a planet without any land, much less an atmosphere, and Velgrynd was stranded on it without any sense of time at all. She would have died instantly if she wasn't a true dragon, but she had both dominate space and an infinite lifespan. She had time to think before she found refuge. Her thinking had almost stopped entirely after all the unbelievable events that occurred to her. There was just too much information to process. But being adrift in another dimension helped her regain her composure too. As Velgrynd pondered the recent events, the sheer volume of mind-blowing data overwhelmed her. She had to abandon thinking at one point, but now, with some time to process, she arrived at the most critical question. How did she gain her freedom from the system her brother Veldanava created? There was only one person she could think of who could have made that happen: the easygoing slime, the demon lord Rimuru, her foolish brother's ally. Velgrynd resisted the impossible thought. That slime, Rimuru, had tinkered with ultimate skills, granted her freedom, and massively improved her powers, evolving them to greater heights. No regular human could possibly achieve such feats. Only her brother Veldanava had the capability to do something so outlandish, if it were possible for anyone else. Shuddering at the thought, Velgrynd turned her attention to her ultimate skill, Cthugha, Lord of the Fire God. It reacted with incomparable power, far exceeding that of Raguel. Most importantly, the fragments she had been taking in resonated as if linked to Ludora's heartbeat. With a light-hearted laugh, Velgrynd decided she didn't need to worry about what Rimuru truly was. He was just Rimuru, Veldora's ally and the one to whom she owed her life. Velgrynd continued her relentless quest, collecting pieces of Ludora's soul as she traveled through various worlds and eras. Her all-consuming love for Ludora drove her to overcome countless obstacles, determined to reunite with him. One day, in a bustling city lined with skyscrapers, Velgrynd found a boy who seemed to embody all that she lacked. Joy and determination filled her heart, but she hesitated. If she gave the boy the remaining pieces of Ludora's soul, it would drastically alter his destiny. With her infinite lifespan, she could continue watching over him until he lived out his life. As she pondered this, a shining piece of Ludora's soul flew over to the boy. The fragment, unnoticed by anyone else, fused within him, causing the boy to disappear from the world. Velgrynd was left holding the first fragment she had found. "Were you one of them too? Did you want to see me?" she asked the fragment, her voice filled with longing. Activating Cthugha, she resolved to pursue the boy, hoping to uncover the mysteries and fulfill her quest to reunite with Ludora.